I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're ranking the bosses of Mortal Shell. This 2020 Souls-like was the first game by development studio Cold Symmetry, and its smaller scope allowed them to focus in on making a core experience that resonated with fans of the genre. In my case, I found the concept of hardening to block attacks and tee up your next strike to be an interesting mechanic, though by the end of the game I was missing a traditional shield. I was far more interested in the shell mechanic. You possess the corpses of 4 different warriors, each with their own unique stats and perks, and while I ultimately stuck with the basic shell for my playthrough, I could see a ton of potential here. So, how does that reflect on the boss fights? Does this game still hold up all these years later? And has this made me interested in the Mortal Shell sequel releasing later this year? Let's jump in and find out. At number 8, we have Ven Noctivagu, found in a cave in southern Fulgrim, guarding the shell of TL the Acolyte. I'm glad I fought this boss before completing my first temple and discovering that the mist version of Fulgrim is chock full of these gremlins, as it helped Ven to feel a little more unique to me. That being said, his attack patterns are woefully simple to deal with, as long as you have the ability to parry and detect unblockable attacks from the tower in Fulgrim's center. Basically, Ven will either always try to attack you with an unblockable strike, which you can simply dodge out of the way from, or he'll do a short 3-hit combo that you can also dodge out of the way from. He staggers extremely easy from your attacks, and his damage output isn't anything to write home about, even in the early game. I was initially quite scared of this fight due to the enclosed small arena, but once I realized how easy he was to dodge, the fight became a test of patience, where the only mistakes I made involved me getting too greedy when going for a few hits, or running out of stamina due to bad management. I do hope for Mortal Shell 2 that we steer away from making regular enemies the focus of early game boss fights, as they often just feel like padding for any given boss roster. At number 7, we have the Grisha, found within Fulgrim. There's one in a large cavern just outside your central hub, which guards the way to Solomon the Scholar's shell, and there are 2 more Grisha within Fulgrim who only appear when the mist is active. This will likely be most people's first boss encounter upon arriving in Fulgrim, and you can encounter him before you've even been to the hub and collected the ability to parry or upgrade your weapon, which is a terrifying prospect. He has 2 unblockable attack strings, one of which has him slam his claw into the ground and yank it out moments later to deal close-range AoE damage, but aside from that, he has a series of melee combo swipes and thrusts which you need to learn to nail the fight. Because without being able to consistently parry the Grishas, you'll find these fights to be a real struggle. My strategy was to always position myself in ways where it forced the boss to do specific attacks, baiting out those that were easier to parry. Combine this with the fact that you can regain health when doing a powerful riposte, and with perfect gameplay, the Grisha can barely land a hit on you. The various refights in the mist all go down a similar gameplay route, with the main dangers being other enemies who might aggro on you while you're fighting the boss. This was a real pressure point for me throughout Mortal Shell, as I found fighting multiple enemies at the same time to be a real pain. One-on-one fights were enjoyable enough, but with the Mist Grisha, you've always got the potential of a Ven Noctivagu to come out from behind and hit you with a grab attack you weren't expecting. Overall, I like the Grisha's design, and the fight is sufficiently tough for new players while being fairly easy for returning veterans, as most first area fights should be. At number 6, we have the Enslaved Grisha, fought within the Abandoned Chamber. This fight plays out very similarly to the previous entry, except this Grisha is chained up and has a giant helmet on. If you face the other Grisha in the game, then this enslaved variant isn't going to put up much of a fight. The combos are just as predictable, with the only danger being a completely new attack where he causes a large stalactite to fall from the ceiling, followed by smaller stalactites soon after. Not that I'd know, I was able to melt this boss without ever seeing this ability. Though I did die on my first attempt due to me completely blanking on the Grisha's parry timings. My brain just hadn't retained that info, and it led to me getting absolutely curb-stomped into the dirt, only for me to style on the boss on my second go-around, making use of my new riposte ability I'd gotten that allowed me to plant an explosive on the boss. I was very entertained. I wish there were more to this entry, but a Grisha is still a Grisha. The unique stalactite attack and the cool arena though were enough to put this encounter above the others. At number 5, we have Hayden, whom you fight repeatedly through the game as part of your questline to unlock all your shiny new weapons. His tutorial fight is naturally quite tough, as you don't have access to the parry yet, which is vital towards succeeding in Mortal Shell, and you likely won't have a grasp of the game's hardening mechanic either. Luckily, this is a fight you're designed to lose, and all you miss out on is a consumable that gives you 5 glimpses, oh well. The real fun comes in Hayden's other in-game fights. When you reach the entrance of one of the 3 major temples, you'll find a book you can interact with which will trigger one of his battles. He'll fight you with either the Smoldering Mace, the Martyr's Blade, or the Hammer and Chisel, and you have to defeat him to be able to wield those weapons yourself. He does technically have a DLC fight where he uses an axe katana, but to be blunt with you all, the main draw of this €7 DLC is a new game mode for players interested in repeat runs of Mortal Shell, and after finishing the main game, I don't really feel a need to replay it. I got what I wanted from this experience, so I'd basically be paying €7 for a single boss fight, and no boss is worth that, I'm afraid. Of his 3 base game fights, the Smoldering Mace was my first, and he handed me my ass for a while. I really had to get to grips with learning when to harden and what attacks I could parry while utilizing a tried and true Mortal Shell strategy of attack while hardened, run away, regain harden, rinse repeat. You'll see this again in a couple of entries. The other 2 fights were a lot easier, as at that point I had fully upgraded my hallowed sword, and my damage output was comfortably high. Heck, I barely even remember the hammer and chisel battle, it went by so quickly. But I imagine had I chosen to do that one or the Martyr's Blade as my first Hayden fight, I'd find them more difficult and perhaps the Smoldering Mace much easier later in the playthrough. It all comes down to the order you fight him in. I really like the idea of unlocking these weapons through a trial by combat, and Hayden being the only other creature who can make use of hardening meant you really felt you were battling an equal, even if his tracking while hardened was actually insane. But I just found the main boss fights of this game to be a little more compelling. At number 4, we have the Unchained, the final boss of Mortal Shell. We discover him near the start of the game as the Old Prisoner, who beseeches us to deliver 3 glands from the nearby temples, which he will use to extract something called True Nectar. Only after doing as he asks, he reveals his intent to ascend, leaving everyone, including our player, behind. So, we follow him, only for the Unchained to discover that he was never fated to ascend. We, the player, are destined to leave Fulgrim. And so a battle breaks out, as if the Unchained cannot ascend this plane, none of us will. Now I have to stress, I know this fight isn't very good design-wise. The boss has an insanely large amount of health that makes the fight quite a slog anytime you die midway through, and some of his mechanics are genuinely infuriating. He can summon minions to attack you, which you will need to deal with lest you get overwhelmed, all while the boss is using his various combos and attacks at the same time. Sometimes you get lucky and the boss just trudges after you slowly, but if you don't learn to deal with his adds, you are going to struggle. It's funny because his regular moveset is honestly pretty easy to deal with. You just need to learn the right moments to harden to avoid damage, and a few simple dodges to the left or right can get you out of the way of most of his attacks. Then it's just a case of stamina management and doing damage. If you hit him with one of your special attacks, you can actually stun him for a short while, which gets you even more hits on the boss. What I wish is that the Unchained leaned more into the water gimmick of his arena. He can summon these waves that push outwards, and if you're caught in them without hardening or rolling, it'll force you back and deal damage. It was a cool idea. Not so fun when it combos with extra enemies stun locking you into oblivion though. He also has this whirlpool attack he breaks out near the end of the fight that is quite goofy, but I kind of enjoyed it, and I know that's an unpopular opinion. Basically, he turns into a whirlpool and begins summoning minions that he can suck in to heal himself. That bit sucks. but I found it fairly easy to navigate the whirl and kill the enemies as they slowly circled the drain. I think I maybe let 2 of them fall in on any given run, so the HP regen wasn't that bad. That being said, I do think it's bad game design to let this boss regenerate health when it already has the biggest health bar in the game and is tanky as fuck. In that sense, I can see why some people consider the Unchained to be the worst fight in Mortal Shell, but I can't in good conscience rank him any lower when I can see the effort put into his battle, even if I also share some of the frustrations. At number 3, we have Crucix, the Twice-Spawn, fought at the end of the Eternal Narthex. First things first, I love the trick they pull on you here, where you go to drink the nectar that normally takes you to the boss arena, only to be dropped down a trapdoor instead. This only works though if this is your final dungeon, which it was for me, though it took me a few attempts to realize I could just harden while falling to avoid the damage. Crucix, meanwhile, is a pretty traditional fight, all things considered. He has 2 heads, the main one and the secondary, which sticks out of his chest, and in the first phase, they both are in charge of planning how to defeat you. The main head uses the spear and shield they wield, hitting us with devastating combos that you have to parry or harden through to avoid. I especially love this attack late in phase 1, where they leap into the air and slam down at you before jumping backwards. The little head, meanwhile, is in charge of ranged attacks. He has a tiny crossbow, and he will fire it, and you will hate it. I don't like the ranged attacks in Mortal Shell. The enemies who use crossbows in the Eternal Narthex were some of the most annoyingly placed in the game, and Crucix is just the same. Sure, if you get close enough to the boss, he'll stand up and begin fighting normally again, but I tried in my winning run to harden through the bolts, basically staying still and letting the attack just run its course, and I counted not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 11 crossbow shots. That's too many, cap it at 5, come on. Then we get to phase 2, and I'm so sorry, but the phase transition cutscene is unintentionally the funniest moment in a Souls-like. The GoPro camera was not the correct move here. The lack of real voice acting and the flailing animations just ruined the atmosphere, I'm afraid. For the second phase, I was struggling with his combos, so I just employed the harden attack, get away, let harden refill, harden attack again strategy, to eventually come out on top. Without his baby, he loses all his ranged attacks, which arguably should make him easier, and I just didn't really feel like learning his parry timings when I had already found a system that worked for me. He can sometimes kick you when you harden in front of him, but then he just starts doing a war cry that keeps him in place while you recover from the stun, so, like, why give him a move where he can knock you out of harden, but then he doesn't actually capitalize on knocking you out of harden? I'll be honest, Crucix was a weird fight, and he didn't feel like he fit into the atmosphere of this area or even this game at all. Most of his servants you fight on the way to the boss are far more threatening than him, but his fight is interesting nevertheless. At number 2, we have Imrod, the Unrepentant, fought within the Sanctum of Flame. He was the first of the 3 temple bosses I took on, and I'd say he left a good impression. He's more physically imposing than the rest of the creatures on his turf, which already puts him in a better spot than Crucix. He wields a giant spiked mace, and his armor is coated with rust and metal, charred and burned like his arena. Corpses litter the ground, and hilariously, at some point in the fight, he has the ability to pick up a corpse and throw it at you, which is so iconic. His melee swings look brutal, but are really easy to avoid or harden through, with the main danger of his fight being his fire breath. If you're in close range, you need to harden through the blast or you'll be inflicted with flame, which does damage over time. However, I discovered that backing off from the boss as he goes to do his fire breath will snap him out of that animation and force him into his charge move, which is an exploit you can use to keep his moveset nice and predictable. He can kick you out of harden, which corresponds with his move where he picks up the course to yeet at you, which at least he's doing something, even if it's still not much, Crucix. Harden attack through his major unblockables, dodge away, rinse repeat, and Imrod goes down. I rank him higher than Crucix because as the clear first of the 3 temples the game wants you to explore, he is the easiest of these bosses and can ease you into the Mortal Shell experience. It was a pretty simple time, but I found him fun. He achieves exactly what he needs to achieve, but in the grand scheme of things, there's only one boss in Mortal Shell that truly manages to elevate itself to a high quality, and that's... At number 1, we have Tarsus the First Martyr, fought at the Martyr's Altar. Without a shadow of the doubt, this is the best fight in Mortal Shell, and in my opinion is the high point of the entire game for me. I was really vibing with the Crypt of Martyrs zone. I felt it was well designed, enemies were fair and fun, progression was interesting, so to cap it all off with the best fight in the game is a great achievement. The battle starts with Tarsus fogging up the room, shielding them from view. Then they'll attempt to spear you with 3 lunge attacks through the mist that you have to avoid, before Tarsus begins their regular combos. I adore the atmosphere of this battle. The music is low and droning, which combos with the various icy crackle effects Tarsus makes with each of his movements. He warps through the arena like glass, rippling in and out of existence to strike you down with long sweeping strikes. He can cause a mid-fight AoE where he forms an ice storm, which you have to back away from to avoid, and sometimes he'll place himself in the center of the arena where the light is at its thickest, obscuring him from view. In Phase 2, he has a stronger AoE where he causes stalagmites to burst from the ground, crackling and striking you down if you're too close, which is one of the most dangerous attacks in the game, by the way. It destroyed me my first time seeing it. But ultimately, Tarsus is a fair fight. These powerful swings are well telegraphed with such a hefty weapon, and you have ample time to dodge his various thrusts from within the fog. His AoEs have a big wind-up so you can run away if you're not confident at dodging them up close, all while the silhouettes of corpses beneath the ice flow under the arena. It's such a vibe, such a mood. Tarsus is a step above the rest in quality, and just in having an interesting moveset, and I'm really hoping that in Mortal Shell 2 we have more fights like this. Because, to be blunt, most of the bosses in Mortal Shell are fairly generic and not terribly complicated. If some of these bosses were in AAA Souls-likes, I'd probably be more critical here, but context is everything. And I think it's fucking impressive for a studio's first game to be this quality, especially as back in 2020, the Souls-like genre was still developing quite a bit. I've got a lot of faith in the sequel. I think these 6 years will really allow this studio to deliver. And that's my list. Have you guys ever played Mortal Shell? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. I want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. It's $4.99, you get a shout out in the description and at the end of videos as well, and you get access to my Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 run playthroughs. If you want to follow me on social medias, they are on screen right now, or you can tune in when I stream live on YouTube every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.